Hey there everyone, Video Game Cabinet here, and tonight we are doing a review on the Xenosaga Trilogy. All three games right here. I actually bought all three of these back when they came out 20 years ago, roundabout's day one release, and I played them back then. I loved them. I decided to go back and revisit them. And this is my review. So here we go. For the last several weeks, I decided to take a break from the backlog and revisit an old favorite of mine, the Xenosaga Trilogy for PlayStation 2. I originally played these games when they were released roughly 20 years ago, and I remember them fondly for their ambitious storytelling, deep revelations, complex characters, and great RPG gameplay. This epic space opera tells a story set 4,000 years into the future where humanity survives by space travel and civilization is still heavily influenced by religion and politics. Starting from the beginning, Episode 1 drew me in all over again with its mysteries of the Zohar monolith and where we end up long after Earth has been abandoned. The story starts at a deliberate pace without much resolution in Episode 1, but it all pays off in spades later. The intrigue and mystery surrounding each of the characters was so brilliantly done that I could not stop playing to see what happened next. Each cutscene is given full cinematic treatment with passionate performances by the large cast of brilliant voice actors. Shion, Cosmos, Jr., Momo, Ziggy, and Chaos will always be some of my favorite heroes in all of role-playing games. The battle system with the ability to boost extra turns and save energy for longer attack combos is also very solid. Also, having the option to transfer into giant mechs during battles is really cool. Episode 1 delivers as a strong introduction to one of the most epic stories I've ever experienced in an RPG, and its ending cutscene left me breathless. Episode 2 is seen by some as a bit of a black sheep in the series, but I could not disagree more. I loved it when I beat it in 2005, and I love it just as much now. After the introductions in Episode 1, the story really starts to heat up in Episode 2. More characters enter the stage, and more fascinating mysteries arise as you continue through this monumental journey. Certain revelations happen in Episode 2 that have my jaw on the floor, and the dramatic beats were absolutely riveting. And the bit of dialogue just before the end credits rolled was the biggest mic drop moment. I thought Episode 2 completely delivered where it counts. Episode 2 sports a slightly different graphical style from Episode 1, designed to have a little bit more of a realistic look. Usually it looks great, but some of the cutscenes use the in-game engine without the extra layer of polish with the facial animations, particularly at the beginning of the game when you first catch up with Shion and the main party. But as the game progresses past the first couple hours, more cutscenes with the high-res faces are used, especially during the story's biggest moments. There are also some new voice actors in Episode 2, but I did not mind. Chaos and Momo's new actors actually sound better than the previous ones, and they do stick around for Episode 3. Shion's new actress sounds fairly similar to the old one and handles the weight of the role very well in my opinion. I honestly like both actresses for Shion, but the old one does return in Episode 3. Now, the new actress for Cosmos was the only one that was jarring to me at first, but I got used to her the further I got through the game. By the end, I thought she started to sound much better. Cosmos' character did not even have very many lines in Episode 2 compared to the other characters, and the original Cosmos actress returns in Episode 3. All the other main and supporting actors in episode 2 appear to be the same as they were from episode 1. The battle system also got some big changes, and I personally thought they were good. I enjoyed figuring out the combo of attacks to break enemies' guard and launch them in the air or knock them down. This added a deep layer of strategy and kept me thinking ahead during battles. I also liked the healthy dose of new side quests this episode offered. I completed 21 out of the 36, each giving me useful upgrades for my characters. In spite of some otherwise controversial changes, Episode 2 is a pivotal chapter in the most ambitious RPG series I have ever played. It is a marvelous continuation of the masterful storytelling set up in the first game, and it got me really excited to play Episode 3 again after all these years. Right before jumping into Episode 3, I researched and watched the events of Pied Piper and A Missing Year on YouTube. Both side stories cleared up a couple of holes that I remembered from when I first played the game about 18 years ago, so that was actually very helpful this time around. Episode 3 is the grand finale to the enormous Xenosaga storyline, and it is the best in the trilogy. This is the big payoff. The bonds between the main characters grow deeper, and the revelations that are dropped towards the end are some of the most shocking and enlightening I have ever seen in a narrative of this scale. The ending stirs the soul and will bring you to tears. Episode 3's hour-long ending cinematic is the best ending I have ever seen in a video game. The original voice actresses for Shion and Cosmos returned for this final entry, and it's great to have them back. They put their heart and soul into these roles, as does everyone else in this glorious cast. These were powerful performances that truly brought the characters to life. As their ties grow deeper, many scenes will hit you on an intensely emotional level. Episode 3 is a gorgeous game with lush environments that pop out of the screen and beautiful character models that have evocative facial expressions. These are the best graphics of the 3 episodes, with a happy medium between the anime style of Episode 1 and the slightly more realistic look of Episode 2. Similar to Episode 2, many of the cutscenes were not given equal treatment, undoubtedly due to budget and time constraints. The big dramatic moments and large action scenes were given the full cinematic polish, just like almost all the cutscenes in Episode 1 and the big ones in Episode 2. However, many of the expository segments of the story use the in-game engine in tandem with 2D avatars and dialogue boxes. The avatars are beautifully drawn, and every line of dialogue is fully voiced, so this style works well during the story's more talkative segments. This style is actually reminiscent of Xenogears, to give you an idea. It would have been great if the development team had the time to give every cutscene the full cinematic treatment like they did in Episode 1, but they must have run out of time and resources. Rest assured that just like Episode 2, most of the cutscenes towards the end of the game are indeed given the full cinematic treatment they deserve. Episode 3 plays the best out of the 3 episodes. Battles load lightning fast. This entry does away with the trial and error combos of Episode 2, which I liked anyway, but still keeps the concept of breaking the enemy's guard with a new break meter. You also still have the boost option from Episode 1 and 2, but you can now save up your boost to perform special attacks. I like the battle system from the first 2 games a lot, but this final one is indeed the best. Episode 3 also has a plethora of fun side quests and secrets to discover. I was deeply engrossed throughout the whole adventure, finding all the best weapons and accessories and magic attacks to pummel the bosses and enemies. Playing through the Xenosaga Trilogy a second time after all these years has reminded me of why I rank these games among the greatest RPGs of all time. Their masterful storytelling is on a level that has rarely been touched. The way the writers integrated philosophy and religion into this space opera was absolutely brilliant, and I am in complete awe of how deep and multifaceted this universe was. The mysteries surrounding each character's motives and pasts kept me intrigued from start to finish, and the payoffs and reveals were unforgettable. All the heroes were passionately voiced by the perfectly cast actors and lovingly designed by the team at Monolith Soft. The bonds between the party members grew deeper and very emotional by the end. The trilogy also had some of the absolute best and most multi-layered villains I have ever seen in a JRPG, all with their own hidden agendas. The battle systems in all three games were great, and I love the nuances that each episode provided. The skill trees I developed and the strategies the enemies pushed me to use were always intricate and engaging. There were also plenty of fun secrets, side quests, and mini games to discover along the way. To top it all off, each episode of Xenosaga boasts a fittingly epic musical score that perfectly punctuates the emotional beats of every cutscene. The blood-pumping escape theme from episode 1, the rousing communication breakdown theme from episode 2, and the melancholic I Believe in You from episode 3 were just some of my favorite tracks. Each episode's end credits plays their own radiant vocal track, Pain and Kokoro from episode 1, Sweet Song in episode 2, and Maybe Tomorrow at the end of episode 3 were all beautiful songs. The music, combined with the cinematic presentation in these games, was outstanding all around, and I have listened to all three of these soundtracks many times over the last couple decades. The last two chapters, at the tail end of episode 3 especially, has some of the best music I've ever heard. One can only dream what Monolith Soft might have done with the full budget and time allowance to do all 6 episodes as originally planned. It is difficult for game developers to make direct sequels that require previous play, due to most gamers never completing games on their backlog. Pied Piper and A Missing Year should have at least been released as 2 full anime movies in between episodes, instead of a mobile game and an interactive slideshow. I also wish that there had been more uniformity with how the cutscenes were presented in episode 2 and 3. Regardless of these quibbles, the Xenosaga Trilogy is a masterwork of storytelling. No other video game has matched the magnitude of these games' storyline, with the possible exception of the creator's previous project, Xenogears. The Xenosaga episodes were, and still are, my favorite games from the entire 6th console generation. They weave a tale spanning the universe itself with equal heart to match it. I cherish these games dearly, and it was immensely satisfying to experience them again after all these years. I rate the Xenosaga Trilogy a 10 out of 10. And that is my very, very long review. Wow, that took a lot out of me. Yeah, like I said, I bought these games roughly 20 years ago. I think it's 2024 now. Episode 1 came out in 2003, and then episode 2 came out in early '05, I think, and then episode 3 came out sometime in 2006. Yeah, I bought them, right when they came out, because back in college, I had played the creator's previous game, Xenogears, and I loved that so much that like I was so excited to play, you know, all three Xenosagas and you know, see what would happen. And they took my breath away. These games were masterpieces, and playing them again after all these years, I still stand by that. You know, last year I was making lists of my top favorite games of each console generation, and Xenogears was number one of Generation 5, I believe. But the Xenosaga Trilogy was number one of Generation 6 with the PS2, Dreamcast, GameCube, and original Xbox. So, yeah, these games, I still stand by that. You know, I do have the little bit of quibble like that, you know, the two side stories that I just found out, you know, on this playthrough about, I didn't know about it 20 years ago, but Pied Piper and A Missing Year, those filled in a couple of holes that I remember kind of wondering about, specifically with the character Ziggy. I don't remember them not going into him too much in episode 3, but when you watch and study the scenes from Pied Piper, it makes everything make a lot more sense. And they do wrap up some stuff a little bit better than I remember. But yeah, episode 1, I remember at the time it was it was noted for having these crazy long cutscenes, and they are indeed long, but yeah, so I've played a couple other RPGs very recently in the 2020s that kind of reminded me of like that length of cutscenes, namely Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The other two Xenoblades also have long cutscenes, but 3 had really long ones that reminded me of like Xenosaga. So if the story is great enough to back it up, you know, I am all for the long cutscenes. And recently, some of the Final Fantasy 16 had super long cutscenes, you know. So it kind of reminded me of this. But anyways, yeah, so yeah, episode 2, I think that one gets a bad rap because, you know, the opening of that game is a flashback with Kanan and Chaos, and it looks great. That first like hour or so that you're playing with them, then when the cutscenes are super well polished with the facial animations that I was talking about. Just like in episode 1, all the cutscenes have the full polish. But in episode 2, the beginning cutscenes with Kanan and Chaos have that full polish. But when they get back with Shion in the main party, the graphics aren't quite as good, and they take a downgrade. And you're kind of wondering, oh, is this what the rest of the game is like? It doesn't look as good as episode 1. But then after the first couple hours, they do start pumping more of those polished cutscenes with like the full facial animations, full high-res polish, and it looks fantastic. And then more of the cutscenes towards the end have that full level of polish. But you can tell that they must have been starting to run out of time and money when episode 2 rolled around. Maybe episode 1 didn't sell as well as they hoped. But still, episode 2 overall like looked great. And Cosmos, when I played it 20 years ago or 19 years ago, episode 2, I remember Cosmos's voice sounding super different and being kind of jarred by it. And I kind of remembered her only having a couple of lines. But playing it again now, she has more than 2 lines. She has like, I don't know, like several times where she speaks, but she does talk the least out of all the main characters, I would say. That I can say with confidence. And the voice actress, I got used to her. I think she started to sound better as she went along. And plus, I already knew that the original voice actress returns for part 3, so I really didn't mind, you know, that actress taking a break for episode 2. And yeah, I do like the changes to the battle system in part 2, except there's like a 1 or 2 second load time right when the battles come in, and that's kind of annoying. It takes like a second or 2 for the music to pop in. In episode 1, it pops in right away, and in episode 3, it's lightning fast. But yeah, episode 3, yeah, it really helped a lot to watch the missing year events and the Pied Piper events that I found on YouTube. Um, Helped make things a lot more sense. Yeah, episode 3, the villains in all 3 of these games are just amazing. I don't want to talk too much about the villains in this game because there's some big surprises, but maybe I'll have to do a spoiler video sometime to talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, these games get very philosophical about like reason to exist and will to power, and it's just absolutely brilliant, you know. Yeah, one last thing I wanted to mention as far as how long these games took me to complete. Episode 1, back in the day when I beat it, it took me 34 and a half hours. This time, my save file was 42 hours. Maybe there was some idle time in there. I did a lot of the extra stuff, but there isn't too much. Episode 2, back when it came out, it took me 22 hours. This time, I did much more of the side quests, and it took me 36 hours this time. And episode 3, I did some extra stuff back then that I didn't do this time, but this time I did other stuff, so I guess it kind of evened out. My old save file from 18 years ago was 42 hours. This one, beating it right now, was 40 hours. So, yeah, that's a grand total for this playthrough that I've done in the last 6 weeks-ish. About 118 hours put into these 3 games combined. So, yeah, that's a lot. I'm just really glad it's done. But yeah, magnificent games anyway. I mean, it just so worth the time investment. It was just incredible, and it was great replaying them again after all these years. Yeah. So, yeah, that's it. That is my review of the Xenosaga Trilogy. 10 out of 10. And have a good night.